Alright, y'all, so we're going to hop into reviewing Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and we're going to review all the rares and the mythics from the set. We're going to go by color, so we're going to start with white, and you will have those available. Remember, though, that I actually have not looked at the majority of these cards, and we're just kind of speculating with no information, and just kind of guessing on things we could do with them, and seeing if we like or dislike them. So, let's hop in and take a look at some cards. Alright, let's start the white cards with the Bellows Awakening. Like, this one's a kind of a weird one here. It's an X3 and a white. As a sorcery, return target artifact or non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with X additional +1/+1 counters on it. It's a 1/1 spirit creature with flying in addition to its other types. Now this card's very weird because it's like a reanimator card, but for not creatures, for just artifacts and enchantments that aren't auras. So it's very specific. And the thing comes back as a 1/1 version of itself. However, you can put however many counters on it. But even just for 4 mana, being able to get back an artifact or an enchantment is actually really strong. There's already some decks with like Jeskai, generally, sometimes just Azorius, that are actually reanimating some stuff like the Phyrexian Portal and things like that. Those decks already exist and they would be looking for a card like this. I'm not sure what else we would want to do with this. However, there are some cases where like you could get an artifact or an enchantment back that have an ETB effect, and then you get that effect additionally. So that could be kind of cool. It's a little bit of a weird card, but stands to be pretty cool. I don't know how many decks need this, but there is a deck already that exists that could use it. So maybe that's just where it goes for now. Interesting card though, not one I'm super excited about, but I appreciate that it's different and we can do some unique things with it. Take a look at Fabrication Foundry. It's a colorless and a white for an artifact. Tap, add 1 mana, or add a white. Spend that mana only to cast artifact spells or activated abilities of an artifact source. You can pay 3 and tap it, exile 1 or more other artifacts you control with total mana value X. Return target artifact card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, this card's pretty interesting, right? Because I think this set is going to have a fair amount of artifacts, and we can do some interesting stuff with this. I mean, using it just as a ramp ability to play your next artifact, or activate artifacts for that matter, is actually pretty cool. There's several cards that you do need to pay some additional cost to flip it and get the stuff on the backside, so this could be good for that. Also, just being able to return artifacts from your graveyard is really cool. So yeah, this gives a couple of different options. I think there's some decks, I don't know if I'd say you'd build around this card, but there's probably some artifact-based decks that can use this card, which would be really nice. And it's just mana ramp for 2 mana. So that's always really good. It's kind of a rare thing. We don't get a lot of that these days. So that also makes this pretty nice. Weird that it's a rare, sort of, but it also kind of makes sense. Get Lost. It's a colorless and a white. It destroys target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. Instant. Yeah, this card's just stellar. I think this is going to become one of those cards that you're just going to see in a lot of different decks for the removal of choice. Like, being able to destroy such a wide range of cards, talking about creature, enchantment, or planeswalker for 2 mana, and only 1 colored mana for that matter, is ridiculous. Like, really, it's over the top good. And then, on top of that, you give the opponent, or I guess the creature's controller, 2 map tokens, because you could target your own stuff, I suppose. But the thing here is that this is pretty spectacular against those mid-ranging control decks that aren't going to have that many creatures anyway and really get to take advantage of the Explorer. So this may not even have downside against several decks. Like, imagine playing a deck where like you just play this and has no downside, right? Because you don't care if you're playing against a creature deck or a non-creature deck. This removes pretty much everything in the format except for an artifact that's relevant, really. This is cool. This is really, really cool. And it's instant speed, which is super awesome. So yeah, this card likely is going to become the removal of choice for a lot of decks. Kultul's Flanker. 3 mana, 3/1, Cat Warrior Flash. It enters the battlefield, you choose 1. You put a +1/+1 counter on this card for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. You gain 2 life, scry 2, or you exile target player's graveyard. I will say the interesting thing about this card is it's works in a weird way very well against stuff like Sunfall, right? You can flash this in, let's say your opponent Sunfalls like 3 of your creatures. You play this, and then it comes into play as a 6/4 creature. That's really good if you've gotten any significant amount of damage in prior to that turn. Like, that's really spectacular. And also, just being able to remove a graveyard can keep people from reanimating stuff like Atraxas and things that we've seen a lot of. The gain 2, Scry 2, not the most exciting thing. It's a little bit of a weird card, but it does possibly go into a cat deck or a warrior deck, which is also good. It's easy to cast, being just 1 white mana in the cost. So, like, yeah, this is a useful card. I don't know how high I would rank it. Probably not very high because it feels situational, but not a bad card either. And I don't know if y'all are aware, but there is someone on Twitter or X, whatever you call it now, who goes by, I need to look up the name real quick, Logan A. Dixon and the number 1, LOGANADIXON 1. And he came up with this pronunciation guide, which I think is really cool. It's very helpful. So for some of the more complicated names in the set, this is kind of a quick reference. You get an idea for the basic language that they use to derive a lot of these names. In this case, as you can see here, Oare is how we pronounce that. Just in case you were wondering, because some people probably saying Ojer or something else. It's actually Oare, so that's actually very neat just to have that. But anyway, this card, Oare Tak, Deepest Foundation, 4 white, white for a 6/6 legendary god with vigilance. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many of those tokens are created. When Oare Tak dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. Now, this is on its face just a 6/6 for 6 with vigilance. Solid, not spectacular, but it's okay. But being able to get 3 times the tokens that you make, pretty insane, right? Now, it does have extra text that if it dies, you return to the battlefield tapped. And in the backside, you can tap for white mana, or you can pay 3 and tap it. Activate it only if you have attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn and only as a sorcery, which lets you flip it back to the other side. You're making a lot of tokens, probably playing a tokens deck. There's a reasonable chance you'll be able to flip it. However, there are a lot of things that are just exiling stuff and whatever, so there's a chance you won't even have it in the graveyard anyway. And it is 6 mana. Now, this is kind of funny if you play it with Mondrak, because then you get to make 3 times 3, which is cool. Yeah, so you get to multiply by 3 for each token you would make, so now it becomes kind of ridiculous. So you can do some fun stuff with that, and I don't think that's a bad thing. However, it is 6 mana, so I don't think you can play more than like 1 of these in a deck, just because. And you're probably still playing like 2 Mondrak in that type of deck in 1 of these. Unless it's some weird variation where you're able to just get more mana easily, then maybe you could play 2 of these and try to do something with it. It's still going to have the issue of, all the sweepers being played, so your creatures are going to be susceptible to all of that. I will say for a commander, pretty much anything that gives you extra counters or extra tokens tends to stay popular and expensive, so I would not be surprised if this card ends up being something like a $35, $45 card in pretty short order. So for that reason alone, it's probably going to be sought after, but I don't know if it's going to be that much of an impact in something like standard or regular 60 card formats of any kind. Resplendent Angel. It's a colorless white-white for a 3/3 creature angel. Flying, at the beginning of each end step, if you gain 5 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. You can pay 6, which is 3 white, white, white until end of turn. Resplendent Angel gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink. Now, interestingly, because we're in a 3-year standard, there are a lot of angels that are still available in standard. That said, there's not necessarily a lot of angels that care about life gain. There's some, not a ton. So, something to think about, that this could fit into some of those decks. I don't know what you would play it over just yet, we'd have to take a look. But it's possible that this card just goes into a life gain deck of some sort, and not really an angel deck, necessarily, right? Now, this card has existed before, but the last time it existed, there was a few more things that like gained you life when angels come into play, and like that sort of thing. So that gave it a better shot at being played. Don't know if that's going to be the case in the new standard. I think there's some places where this might be true, it might work out. Maybe there's some vampire deck that's gaining life each turn, and then you just play this in there to be able to make the extra angel tokens. But yeah, right now I'd be leaning toward this hitting more in a life gain deck than an actual angel deck. Sanguin Evangelist, 2 colors and a white for a 2/1 vampire cleric with battle cry. When it enters the battlefield or dies, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. Yeah, this card, ooh, it's hard to be mad at this card. This card's very good. I mean, 3 mana, like, even if you never get to Battle Cry, let's say you never get to attack with this, right? Bare minimum, you're paying 3 mana for a 2/1 and a 1/1. That's not bad. That's effectively a 3/2 creature split across 2 bodies for 3 mana. Like, that's fair. But then if this dies, you get a 1/1 also. So then that means your 3 mana produced a 2/1, a 1/1, and a 1/1. That's actually pretty good. And then if you get to attack, well, now everything else gets +1/+0, which generally also means your opponent's probably going to try to block this to keep your other stuff from getting bonuses and not necessarily all your other things you're attacking with. So that's pretty good too. And one of those things you're attacking with flies. So yeah, I kind of like where this is going. This card's pretty sweet. And if you have anything that triggers from creatures coming into play or stuff like that, then you get 2 triggers off of it. Like, this can fit into a lot of different decks, honestly. Like, I would argue and say, even if you're playing just a tokens deck, there's a reality that you could play this card just to attack and have your tokens be bigger while producing an extra token, and you don't even need to care about the other vampire part of it. Could fit some cleric builds as well. Like, this is a pretty slick card. I think this is going to be pretty popular for a few different reasons. Thousand Moon Smithy. 2 colorless, white, legendary artifact. When this card enters the battlefield, create a white soldier, gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you can tap 5 untap artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, transform Thousand Moon Smithy. Alright? And then the backside is Barracks of the Thousand. You can tap it for a white whenever you cast an artifact or creature spell using mana provided by Barracks of the Thousands. Create a white gnome, or just like a gnome on the front, gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness is equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. So the thing about this card that's interesting is theoretically, this card could be played in a deck that doesn't even care about having a lot of creatures, right? You could just play artifacts and then use those artifacts to keep generating more gnomes. And the gnomes will be bigger, equal to the number of artifacts you control. So, yeah, and it's not going to be impossible to just flip this to the backside and then everything you play now is producing another gnome. Could be a pretty cool card. I think the first inclination is, okay, let me find a way to play this into a creature deck, and now I'm generating creatures every turn. But realistically, maybe this goes into some type of mid-range or control deck, and this is one of your win conditions, where you're just making more gnomes. Now, it is a legendary artifact, so you wouldn't really want to play more than probably 2 of these in that type of deck, and then just draw into it. But it is a pretty cool card, and it's doing something definitely unique than a lot of other Magic cards do. And our last white card is Unstableglyph Bridge. 3 colorless, white, artifact. When Unstableglyph Bridge enters the battlefield, if you cast it, for each player choose a creature with power 2 or less that players control, then destroy each creature except creatures chosen this way. You can craft with artifacts, so you can pay 5, exile this artifact and another artifact you control or one in your graveyard to let you get Sandswirl Wanderglyph, which is a 5/3 golem with flying. When an opponent casts a spell during their turn, they can't attack you or a planeswalker you control. An opponent who attacked you or a planeswalker you control this turn can't cast spells. So your opponents can either cast spells or attack, but they can't do both while this is out. Not bad. It is only a 5/3, so pretty easy to deal with it. My problem, I don't know, man. Like, I feel like I'm going to gripe about this a lot in this series of videos, but if anybody from Wizards is watching this, can we just take like a set or 2 off from making sweepers? Seriously? Especially in like 3-year standard. That's 12 sets worth of stuff. By the time we get done with 3 years of standard, there's going to be like, I don't know, like 25 sweepers available. That's way too many. And not even just because like they wipe out creatures or whatever. Like, each of these is only doing something slightly better or slightly worse than the other one. And they're not even fun to talk about because they're mostly like, hey, these wipe out creatures. Cool. I know it's a little bit gripey and probably a terrible way to end this video because we're on the last white card, but really, I just don't understand. Like, I guarantee you there's going to be one in black and probably one in red or whatever, because we get them every set, and it's just weird to have them because we have so many that even good ones right now don't get played. Seriously, that's how crazy they are. Like, really good sweepers, we don't even consider them because, like, oh, well, this other one's just better, and we already have it, and it's going to be around for another 2 years, so why even worry about it? Now, this one, I will say, at 5 mana, it's fine. Removes everything except for 2 small creatures, or at least 1 from each player. So it's worth playing. The backside's okay. Not spectacular, but fine. And it's pretty easy to get because you only have to pay 5, which you already have from casting this, and then sacrifice something else and turn it into a 5/3. However, this doesn't say, let's see. Yeah, that's not even while this just gets rid of all the other creatures and destroys them. So it doesn't matter. Once it does what it's going to do, then you can go ahead and sacrifice it and it doesn't matter. So yeah, it's fine. Not particularly interesting or outstanding. It's not doing anything crazy. Just like another tool for the control decks that I don't know if they want, unless it's some variant that feels they need that creature that's on the backside. But interesting nonetheless, I suppose. At least in that regard. That's going to do it for this video, but if you want to check out more cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, check out one of these next videos. But that's all I have you for now. We'll catch you next time.